1993, and there's nothing good on Netflix that night. So what do you do for entertainment? Lucky for you, there's a medicine show in town performed by a man who calls himself the Rattlesnake King. He'll kill and boil a snake right in front of you, and then he'll try to sell you his patented snake oil. Did you know it cures everything from rheumatism to partial paralysis? Only 50 cents a bottle. Welcome to MoneyDoc TV, a channel dedicated to entrepreneurs who risked it all to create today's most iconic brands. Let's get started. An old saying goes, a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person has only one. Many of us may have heard this saying at some point in our lives, but not everyone fully understands it. A sick person is often prepared to do anything, to believe in everything, and to try anything that could be the cure for an illness. And believing in pseudo-medicine is one of the many alternatives. Nowadays, the term snake oil is used to describe solutions to problems that turn out to be hoaxes or frauds. It is also used to describe substances that have no real value and are advertised as remedies for various ailments. The term actually originated in the late 19th century, as snake oil was once quite seriously promoted as a potent natural medicine. Various fake medicines have been popular throughout history. Until the early 20th century, there were no regulations to prohibit false advertising of medicinal products, so quite a number of people made a lot of money by selling worthless and sometimes even dangerous substances to the unwitting people who sought cures for their physical troubles. Medicine shows were also popular. They were usually gatherings of hoaxers who presented a variety of patented medicines. This so-called Rattlesnake King was named Clark Stanley. He used to be a cowboy, but now he's patented the snake oil liniment that is going to make him rich. Good for man and beast, the bottle read. The most remarkable curative discovery ever made in any age or country. A liniment that penetrates muscle, membrane, and tissue to the very bone itself, and banishing pain with a power that has astonished and convinced 2 generations of intelligent people. Shockingly, most of these claims are true. Real snake oil actually does help with aches, pains, arthritis, and bursitis. It's basically the 19th century equivalent of icy hot topical salve that relieves muscle and joint pain. The problem? Stanley's snake oil was not the real thing. Although it is interesting that instead of claiming it was a cure-all, he stuck to claiming it could cure only what real snake oil could do. The snake oil craze that swept the United States at the tail end of the 19th century was actually brought on by legitimate snake oil. For centuries, snake oil has been a folk remedy used in Chinese traditional medicine to treat joint pain. Many brought this practice to the U.S. in the 1860s, when Chinese laborers were brought over to work on the Transcontinental Railroad. In order to make real snake oil, you need to boil not a rattlesnake, but a Chinese water snake. When Chinese immigrants came to work for the Transcontinental Railroad, many would have brought this remedy with them. Most immigrants came from peasant families and couldn't afford to see a doctor, so they would have used various homemade remedies like snake oil to self-medicate. This remedy came from the Chinese water snake, which was rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which naturally help reduce inflammation. So snake oil in its original form effectively managed the effects of arthritis and bursitis. Water snakes have much higher levels of fat and oil, because they need to regulate themselves in water rather than air. American rattlesnakes had no such omega-3s, little fat, and very few redeeming medicinal qualities. But that did not stop entrepreneurial salesmen from taking the idea of an exotic Chinese medicine and marketing it to a Western audience. After a long day's work, the Chinese workers would rub the snake oil on their joints, offering it to the American workers, partnering with them. It wasn't just Chinese laborers that used snake oil. Native American tribes like the Choctaw used literal snake oil to treat cuts, burns, rheumatism, and other ailments. The oil was also believed to have healing properties for respiratory problems, such as colds and bronchitis. During the 1800s, there was a general belief in the power of earthly remedies. This was a time before modern medicine, and people were desperate for anything to ease their suffering. So, when someone came along promising a cure-all, people were quick to believe it. As the public experienced the effectiveness of snake oil, it wasn't long before entrepreneurs in the United States started making and selling their version of snake oil. So this literal American cowboy, who was himself tired of manual labor and looking to make a quick buck, Clark Stanley was a showman through and through. He took the idea of snake oil and turned it into a sensation. While other snake oil salesmen were hitting the dusty trails of the Wild West at the time, none of them had the reach or flair of Clark Stanley. Ironically, Clark Stanley did credit traditional medicine practices with giving him the recipe for snake oil liniment, but he claimed it was the Hopi Native American tribe, not the Chinese, that showed him its healing powers. That's not where Clark Stanley's bogus claims ended, however. Chinese water snakes being, well, non-existent in America, Clark Stanley turned to rattlesnakes for the main active ingredient in his snake oil. However, as the omega-3 fatty acid content of rattlesnakes was not as high as that of Chinese water snakes, the therapeutic effects were similarly diluted. To add to the irony even further, Stanley wrote a book about his experiences as a cowboy-turned-snake oil salesman titled The Life and Adventures of the American Cowboy, Life in the Far West. In the book, Stanley cautions people against selling fake versions of his fake snake oil. As the 20th century dawned, regulations tightened with the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906. This was the first time that the government had to regulate food and drugs. Under increased scrutiny, Stanley's snake oil liniment faced examination to expose its true nature. What investigators discovered was a shocking revelation that shattered the illusion created by the Rattlesnake King. Oh, and Clark Stanley's snake oil didn't even contain a snake. It was revealed that Stanley's liniment contained no actual snake extract, but instead a dubious mixture of mineral oil, chili peppers, turpentine, and various ingredients. The deceptive marketing tactics and false promises were exposed, tarnishing Stanley's reputation and shattering the illusions he had created. Of course, we now know that snake oil does not have any magical properties. However, the placebo effect can be powerful. Many experts speculate this is how snake oil salespeople were able to dupe so many people for so long. However, it soon became apparent that snake oil sold by people like Clark Stanley had no medicinal properties whatsoever. Unfortunately, there was no way to determine if other so-called snake oil products contained natural snake oil or just sold mineral oil as a panacea. Even if Stanley's concoction had material from a rattlesnake, it's unlikely that it would be that effective. Modern studies show that rattlesnakes only contain approximately 8% EPA, which is not enough to have any real medicinal benefits. However, sources stated that salmon contained at least 18% EPA and was much easier to acquire and handle. Then the federal regulators seized his product in 1917, but by that point, he had already been selling the product for 24 years. The aftermath of Stanley's deceitful practices was swift. Faced with the consequences of his fraudulent acts, Stanley was slapped with a meager $20 fine, a mere pittance compared to the damage inflicted on the unsuspecting public. However, his name would forever be etched in history, as the term snake oil became synonymous with ineffective and fraudulent products, particularly in the realm of medicine. The damage was done once the word got out about Stanley's fraud. Then, the term snake oil became synonymous with any product that made false or exaggerated claims. Even today, the term describes anything phony or fraudulent. While the Chinese remedy might have had some benefits, time lost its existence in Western culture. It's doubtful that anything the snake oil salesman sold did anyone any good. They were nothing more than dishonest charlatans. Clark Stanley's story should remind us all of the perils of deceptive marketing. It urges modern-day business owners and marketers to prioritize transparency, ethics, and consumer trust in their practices. Learn from the mistakes of history so we can forge a path towards a more ethical and trustworthy marketing landscape. We really hope you enjoyed today's video.
Building a flat pack wardrobe, finally learning a new language, sorting out the
The term snake oil salesman is one that has stood the test of time, being used even today to describe 100 years later, would find that it was exceptionally high in icosapentaenoic acid, a type of omega-3 fatty acid that could be absorbed through the skin and provide numerous anti-inflammatory benefits. Benefits that the Americans who were lent the medicine from their Chinese co-workers quickly spread word of to their friends and family. News of this legitimate medicine began to spread throughout the United States, with people beginning to exaggerate the claims about just how much it could actually act as a remedy for. And as it grew in popularity, many recognized the potentially lucrative opportunity America's snakes could pose. One of these being Clark Stanley, a cowboy that was looking to find a new career involving less backbreaking work. He figured that the medicine could make him rich, and so he set to work, not actually getting the...
We have all heard it. That guy's a snake oil salesman, a shyster, a con. This terminology has become an intricate part of our culture, but where did that term come from? Were there really snake oil salesmen? Did they really sell snake oil? It all began when the Transcontinental Railroad was being built in North America. Chinese immigrants came over, and with them their cures for the aching joints and muscles that they had at the end of each workday. What they used was snake oil. Americans, seeing how well this remedy worked, jumped on the bandwagon, and word quickly spread that this was a cure for rheumatism, joint pain, and other things. The craze soon developed into a fervor. People began snake farms. In the Patriot newspaper in 1885, rattlesnake oil was said to be going for $4 an ounce. By 1891, the Wheeling Register claimed rattlesnakes were going for $25 to $50 each if they were 4 feet or longer. Soon, snake oil salesmen were everywhere, touting the wondrous claims of this cure. They would grandstand at circuses and carnivals, thrilling the audience with their hissing rattlers and claims of the wonderful drug. Clark Stanley was the most famous snake oil salesman and became known as the Rattlesnake King. Problem was, there wasn't much snake in the snake oil. Mostly, it was mineral oil, camphor, turpentine, and red pepper. It did little to relieve the sore, aching muscles, and suspicion grew. Even when it was made with authentic rattlesnake oil, it never seemed to match the claims of the Chinese workers' oil. So why was that? It appears when the Americans made their snake oil, it was done with rattlesnake. This was the crux of the problem. It was the wrong snake altogether. In 1905, Collier magazine did an expose on the snake oil salesmen, declaring them frauds, pushing useless and sometimes dangerous.
For a very long time, many people have medicine shows were booming across America. These flashy traveling medicine shows, and the public was hooked. But the big question on the minds of federal officials was this: what exactly were people swallowing, rubbing on their skin, or giving to their children every day? To find out, the government launched an investigation, and what they uncovered turned out to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. When early lab tests were done on these popular remedies, the truth became impossible to hide. Many of the most common medicines weren't medicines at all. They were cocktails of powerful and often deadly chemicals. The ingredients were listed with scientific-sounding names that most people didn't understand, but underneath the fancy labels were substances that we now consider illegal or highly regulated. One of the most shocking discoveries was the amount of alcohol in these tonics. Some bottles were found to contain up to 80% pure alcohol, more than double the strength of whiskey. Medicines like Peruna, Hostetter's bitters, and Drake's Plantation bitters promised to cure everything from indigestion to nervous collapse. What they really did was get people drunk, especially women and children, all under the false promise of healing. But it didn't stop there. As testing continued, investigators found opioids in countless medicines. Morphine and opium were frequently used to numb pain and calm the nerves. What this really meant was that users were becoming chemically dependent without any idea that the product was addictive. One of the most tragic examples was Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, a widely sold product meant for teething babies. It was sweet, thick, and seemed to ease pain instantly. But its main ingredient was the deadly morphine. After the intake of these drugs, some infants slipped into unconsciousness. Others stopped breathing. Many never woke up. Meanwhile, cocaine was marketed as a wonder drug. It was added to drops for toothaches, syrups for depression, and even children's tonics. It created a temporary burst of energy and confidence, which made people believe the medicine was working until the crash came, and they needed more. Cocaine toothache drops were especially popular for kids. The more researchers looked, the more horror they found. However, the most annoying thing about these drugs was the fact that many of these medicines claimed to be natural or herbal. Words like Indian, root, sage, and tonic were used to create trust and tradition. But often, there was nothing natural about them. Some included chloroform, a powerful anesthetic that could knock someone out cold. Others had turpentine, sulfuric acid, or mercury, ingredients that could cause lasting damage. And while users thought they were buying ancient Native American or Chinese remedies, these were just marketing tricks. Most of the so-called tribal or foreign medicines were made in urban factories designed to sound exotic, but created purely for profit. And here comes the shocker. Most people did not even know they were becoming addicted. The word addiction was not widely used or understood. Instead, customers thought they were simply needing another dose. Housewives, farmers, school teachers, and factory workers all took these medicines every day, never realizing they were becoming chemically dependent. So, whenever someone felt sick, they reached for a bottle. When they could not sleep, they took a syrup. When their children cried, they gave them a soothing tonic. The cycle repeated for weeks, months, even years, and by the time the body needed the drug just to feel normal, it was too late. This quiet addiction spread like wildfire, and because it did not look like a back-alley drug problem, it went unnoticed. People were not just passing out on the streets, they were nodding off in church pews and at dinner tables. Another thing investigators discovered was even more disturbing. The companies making these products weren't innocent. Many of them knew exactly what they were selling and exactly what it did. They hired chemists, poured money into flashy advertising, and had powerful allies in both government and the media. Some even bribed doctors or printed fake testimonials just to boost sales. They claimed their medicines were scientifically tested, even though there were no regulations in place. To make matters worse, they invented fake diseases like female weakness or liver exhaustion to scare people, then sold the only so-called cure. In other words, they created the illness and sold the solution. Investigators also uncovered the powerful role newspaper ads played in the rise of fake medicine. These ads promised hope to the hopeless, using bold, eye-catching headlines like, "One bottle cured my cancer." Good for the nerves, the heart, and the soul. Safe for children and infants. But the truth was far from what was printed. These companies weren't offering healing, they were offering addiction. The temporary relief people felt didn't come from being cured, it came from being high. And the worse the withdrawal symptoms became, the more convinced people were that they needed another dose. This was not just a health crisis, it was a business model built on false hope and chemical dependence. Even though some people tried to sound the alarm, their warnings were often ignored. A few were doctors, some were journalists who saw the damage firsthand. Others were concerned citizens who began writing letters and editorials, desperate to raise awareness. Families were falling apart, children were dying, and those in power weren't doing anything about it. But their voices were brought down because of money. The patent medicine industry has become one of the most profitable in America. Their ads paid for entire newspapers. Their donations supported political campaigns. And with no federal laws against false medical claims, they had nothing stopping them. The victims were silenced. Their stories were buried. And their suffering was blamed not on poison in the bottle, but on so-called moral weakness. A sign of hope finally appeared in the early 1900s when the government decided it had seen enough, with too many bodies, too many fake cures, and too many lives destroyed. A small but determined group of reformers, scientists, and journalists began pushing for something the country had never seen before: real medical regulation. And when the truth about what was actually inside those bottles was revealed to the public, everything began to change. People's eyes were opened, and the outrage was impossible to ignore. Curious to find out what happened next? Stay tuned. The turning point. As more families suffered and public trust began to break down, the movement against snake oil and fake medicines finally gained momentum. For decades, flashy salesmen and powerful companies had gotten away with selling dangerous, addictive, and even deadly products. But change was coming, and it started with a few brave voices who refused to stay silent. One of those voices was Samuel Hopkins Adams, an investigative journalist working for Collier's Weekly. In 1905, Adams published a groundbreaking series called The Great American Fraud. In these articles, he exposed how patent medicine companies misled the public, used fake testimonials, and sold products filled with alcohol, narcotics, and toxic chemicals. His writing was clear, emotional, and backed by evidence. For the first time, everyday Americans saw just how badly they had been deceived. Adams did not hold back. He wrote about how some mothers unknowingly gave morphine-laced syrups to their babies. He described how people suffering from real diseases wasted their money on useless tonics while their conditions got worse. His work shocked readers and put pressure on politicians to finally take action. At the same time, scientists and doctors were also beginning to speak up. Laboratory tests confirmed what Adams and others had reported. Many popular medicines were little more than addictive poisons. Even respectable-looking brands were guilty of hiding ingredients or exaggerating what their products could do. The public outcry grew louder. Newspapers picked up the story. Churches and community leaders called for reform. And finally, in 1906, the U.S. Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act, the first major law to regulate medicine and food. This law required companies to list the active ingredients on their labels. It also banned false or misleading claims. For the first time in U.S. history, there were real consequences for selling fake or dangerous medicines. Although the law did not solve everything overnight, it was a turning point. It marked the beginning of federal oversight in the health industry and gave birth to what would later become the Food and Drug Administration, FDA. Snake oil salesmen could no longer operate in total darkness. They were being watched, tested, and challenged. But not everyone gave up right away. Some companies changed their labels but kept the same harmful formulas. Others moved their operations underground. And even as the government cracked down, the demand for quick cures and miracle tonics never fully disappeared. Still, the 1906 law changed the game. It inspired new waves of reform, stricter laws in the years to follow, and a public that was more cautious about what they put in their bodies. And this is where the story takes a different turn. Because to truly understand the impact of snake oil, we need to look at how the legacy of the snake oil salesman still affects the world we live in today. Don't go anywhere. It only gets better from here. Impact of the snake oil on our world. Though the era of snake oil salesmen may seem like a distant part of America's wild past, the truth is their influence is still very much alive today. The scams, strategies, and mindsets that built their fortunes continue to ring through our modern healthcare system, especially in the billion-dollar industries of supplements, wellness products, and pharmaceuticals. So, let's start with marketing. One of the most lasting tactics from the snake oil era was the use of fear-based and hope-based advertising. Scare people into believing they're sick, then sell them the only solution. Create a sense of urgency, use emotional testimonials, and promise results that sound too good to be true. It will surprise you to know that many of today's supplement ads and late-night infomercials follow the same pattern. These products claim to boost your immune system, fight aging, or balance your hormones. And most of the time, they do this without any scientific backing. Some are harmless, but others can interact dangerously with real medications or lead people to delay proper treatment. Even in modern pharmaceutical marketing, the fingerprints of the snake oil culture remain. Direct-to-consumer drug ads, now common in the U.S., often highlight dramatic results, smiling actors, and soothing music, while the risks are buried in fast-talking voiceovers or fine print. It's legal, but the emotional manipulation is familiar. One of the darkest parts of the snake oil story was how it turned addiction into something that looked like healing. Sadly, that didn't end with the reforms in 1906. If we jump ahead to the 1990s and early 2000s, we see the same pattern again during the opioid crisis. Just like in the days of patent medicine, drug companies claimed that pills like OxyContin were safe and not addictive, even though early signs showed they were dangerous. They encouraged doctors to prescribe more, filled the market with pills, and ignored the risks. The result was another addiction crisis that took hundreds of thousands of lives. This modern epidemic looks a lot like the past. The same drive for profit, the same misuse of science, the same trust from people who were simply looking for relief. Today, the wellness industry is using the same tricks snake oil salesmen used long ago, just in a modern way. On social media, Influencers sell things like detox teas, miracle vitamins, and anti-aging creams. Many of them have no medical training, and the products aren't properly checked or approved. They rely on fancy packaging, personal stories, and vague promises, just like the traveling salesman of the 1800s. Even the phrase snake oil still means something today. When people say, "That's just snake oil," they mean it's fake, something that promises to heal but doesn't really work. The reason that phrase has lasted so long is because the problem still exists. But not everything is bad. The harm caused by fake medicine in the past led to real change. Over time, it helped create stronger rules, safer drug testing, and better health information for the public. Today, we have systems to check the safety of medicine and tools to protect people from being fooled. Still, the history of snake oil reminds us that these protections didn't come easily. They were not gifts from those in power. They were the result of people speaking up, fighting back, and demanding the truth. It's also a reminder that desperation can make people vulnerable, and that hope is a powerful tool when used the wrong way. Anytime someone promises an easy fix to a complicated problem, history should make us pause. The Wild West might be gone, but its spirit lives on in every too-good-to-be-true health claim, every miracle cure ad, and every unregulated bottle sitting on a drugstore shelf. The tools have changed, the language is different, but the game remains the same. So next time you see a product that swears it can heal everything, think back to the old wooden wagons, the staged shows, and the glass bottles filled with more harm than help. Because although snake oil may have been exposed, its legacy still lives among us. So, what are your thoughts on the dark legacy of snake oil and the hidden drug trade that shaped the Wild West? Do you think those early medicines were just a product of their time or something far more dangerous? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold truths from history. And make sure to click the next video on your screen, because if this story shocked you, just wait until you see what we uncovered next.